Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everybody. We're saying good evening officially from Montreal. The first thing we're going to do is ask you to type us in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. We'll get started in just a moment. Good evening, everyone. I'll just wait for more people to load in here. All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Zita. I am a career advisor with the CATS team, which stands for Career and Transition Services over at McGill University School of Continuing Studies. It's quite hard to get all that on one small business card, by the way, so we just call ourselves CATS. Welcome, everyone. We are going to start today's session, first off, by acknowledging the rest of the CATS crew. So first, who I see first is Deanna, if you want to say hello.
Hello, welcome.
And then after Deanna, I see Nayo Gariefi.
Hello, everyone. Delighted to be here.
Perfect. I'm going to save the next two speakers for after, because they really are the ones that are going to take the shine from this point on. So I'm going to ask you all if you can kindly please mute yourselves. We are going to go to a short video and then come right back. Deanna, if you don't mind. Thank you. Thank you, Deanna. At this point, it is 7 p.m. Montreal time. And if you have attended any of our previous sessions, you would have seen that every session we begin with a land acknowledgement. It's imperative for us to highlight and acknowledge whose land by which we are using. This is already the third edition of PowerSkills. This year's theme is Lives Transformed, our post-pandemic era. I'd like to recognize we at CATS acknowledge that our work in Montreal takes place on the unceded Indigenous lands of the Gahanehagewa/Mohawk territory. This land is known as a gathering place for many First Nations, and at PowerSkills, we are committed to using this summit as a place of gathering, connection, and reconnection to empower all voices and perspectives by providing free and accessible learning opportunities and connection. So thank you all for being with us. Welcome. I am going to now mute myself, but before I do that, I'm going to pass it over to our moderator, facilitator for today, who's going to introduce our session and our speaker. So I hope I say your name well. Now I feel like I have a spotlight on me, Greg. So I'd like to introduce Greg Raveski.
Oh boy, sorry.
No way. That didn't
it's
go
all
well?
right. It's quite all right. It's Rayevsky.
You said rye whiskey. Hold on.
Well, I said if you can say rye whiskey, you're halfway there.
Okay.
It's Rayevsky for the audience, just so they know.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this event. Completely caught off guard when Emily, as part of your team, invited me to be facilitator for this meeting, because coincidentally, I know the speaker fairly well on a professional basis. I've known Marina for almost 5 years, and I hold her opinions of business and personal branding in high regard. I hope that everyone here is going to draw inspiration from her message tonight. I'll just introduce Marina. Quite impressive experience that she's achieved in Canada. Marina Byezhanova is a Soviet-born, Ukraine-raised, Canada-based entrepreneur whose mission is to scale the reach of people's voices. She's co-founder of a personal branding agency called Brand of a Leader. Marina has been quoted and referenced in such publications as Inc.com, Forbes.com, Fast Company, Success Magazine, Wall Street Journal, and the Financial Post, and has spoken to audiences of entrepreneurs and business executives in North America, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Marina is a proud member of Entrepreneurs Organization and is presently the Canadian social media expert serving on the regional board of directors. And with that, Marina, over to you. And you're on mute.
I think it's frozen.
I think she's frozen.
Oh.
Oh,
all
no,
good.
there we go. Oh, now you're on mute.
Oh my God, this freaked me out.
Love
so bad.
technology.
What did I miss, Greg? What was the
Oh.
last thing you said?
It was all good.
God. Was it my turn to speak and then I froze?
Yeah, it's quite all right.
Oh God, that's a great way to start. Thank you so much, Greg. Were you still going to say something else?
No, I was just introducing you and giving you your professional credentials and just mentioning that the message is going to be quite transformative. So over to you.
I hope so. Thank you very much. I did get so freaked out when I saw that. It's happened to me now a couple of times. I mean, listen, the wonders of technology, right? Having to deliver presentations virtually in the last 18 months. And also I teach at Concordia University, having to teach a course all of a sudden online. That was my first virtual presentation type experience, was giving a course on social media strategy on ROI to a bunch of 20-year-olds who have no patience for somebody trying to figure out technology. Okay, no patience. So that was my first experience. No joke. First class that I was doing virtually on Zoom for them. And I had done a couple already in the past in person. But that first class, I started texting people mid-class, and I'm the instructor saying, I'm gonna shut this down. Like, I'm not gonna do this. Like, I'm about to cry and run away. Like, true story. And then of course, over the last 18 months, I've had internet crash, connect through hotspot, mid-presentation, come back. So those things have become, part of our reality and the transformation that we are all going through, right? The theme of this conference is transformation for a reason. I don't think there's a single person here tonight that has not experienced any kind of transformation in the last 18 months. If there is, please speak your truth. I want to know. Maybe I'll even feel jealous to an extent, because for me, it has been an insane amount of transformation. I have to say, I'm really impressed to see so many people here, because it's Friday after 7 p.m. and the world has opened up, right? Like 10 months ago, I would have been like, okay, where do you have to go, right? We're curfew, of course you're there. But my business partner asked me today how many people would attend. They said, listen, if 3 show up, I'm going to be like, these 3 are really interested about personal branding. So that's good for me. So I'm really happy to see all of you here. If I may ask you for a favor, I would ask you to turn on your cameras. Listen, we are past the times where we felt self-conscious turning out camera and video and showing people our messes. What have we not seen on Zoom so far? Like everything. I've seen, people, significant others passing by in underwear. I've seen naked people running around. I've seen animals jumping on keyboards. We've seen it all. So no matter what you were, preparing dinner or cleaning up after dinner or having dinner, seeing you on camera, seeing video helps a lot. And we are talking about branding today. We are talking about personal branding. We are talking about putting ourselves out there. And if we're really not comfortable doing that, we've got a bit of a problem, but hopefully I will inspire you to think otherwise today. So let me share my screen with you. Greg already introduced me, so I'm not going to be telling you much about myself right now. I'm going to be talking about the topic that we're going to be covering today. I have to also tell you, I normally do this masterclass in an 1.5 hour format. So I'm going to be talking a lot, and I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you, and at one point giving you examples of a lot of exercises that you can do, hands-on stuff. I want to talk a little bit about theory. So we're going to be talking about personal branding myths. What is a personal brand? It's a topic that's been talked about so much these days, isn't it? Everywhere you turn, personal brand, build a brand. Then you ask people, well, what's a personal brand? And we're not so sure. So we're going to talk about that. What is a personal brand? Why do you need a personal brand? Do you need one? I think you're curious about it. That's why you're here tonight. So why do you need a personal brand? What are the benefits of having a personal brand? But then where things are going to get a lot more granular and tangible is when we talk about how to build your personal brand. So if I speak fast, I'm sorry. I'm not going to slow down even if you ask me to, because we don't have that much time. And I also want to leave some time for your questions. But if you do feel that you missed something, if you feel that there's something that you want more clarification on, if I mentioned maybe an exercise and you want to know more about it, you can message me after. Okay, you can always email me, you can DM me on LinkedIn, you can text me. I even share my cell phone number at the end, so you can reach out and I will clarify. Okay, but let's go fast so that we can cover a lot of different things. This is what we're talking about in the next hour. So I want to start with debunking personal branding myths. And the reason that I want to talk about it is twofold. Well, one, I wanted to be clear what it is that we're talking about when we say personal branding, right? So that we're on the same page. And also, I think that by debunking these myths, I'm going to assuage a lot of concerns. A lot of people, because we hear about personal branding so much, feel either intimidated or, depending on your definition of it, you either feel intimidated by the idea, like my brand, like who am I to have a brand? What is this whole thing of a brand? Or you feel that it's too ridiculous and fluffy, like, oh, some other like big mouth is talking about brand yourself, you have to brand, you have to brand. All those myths might be preventing you from leaning into building a personal brand and also reaping all the benefits. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about the 3 most common misconceptions when it comes to personal branding. Myth number 1, everyone has a brand. Have you heard this yet? Everyone has a brand. Whether or not you like it, you already have a brand. So you might as well own your brand, right? It's not true. Everybody has a reputation. A reputation, whether or not you like it, you have. But not everyone has a brand. And the two are quite different. And you might say, well, what is the difference, right? My reputation is my brand. If I'm known for my reputation of ABC, well, then that's my brand. Not quite true. Look, we can take as an example a corporate brand. We can use a corporate brand as an example, actually a personal brand too. I'll give you examples of both. You've heard about the recent scandal that the Canadians are involved in, right? They made a draft, they drafted a player who has a bit of a shady past, right? And there's big negative media coverage, right? That affects the reputation of the Canadians, right? They made a bad choice that affects their reputation. Is it going to be detrimental to them? Is it going to be, destructive to them? No, because they have a brand. Their brand is so strong and so big that it protects them as a shield. Listen, let's take, for example, Kardashians as an example. Okay, I'm not promoting Kardashians or giving them as an example of a personal brand that you should aspire to, but just as an example to give you, to show you the difference between reputation and brand. Does Kim Kardashian have a solid, fantastic reputation? Well, her brand even started with some, scandalous, right, shady stuff. But she has a brand. They have a brand. We cannot argue against it, right? So not the same thing. So everybody has a reputation. Not everybody has a brand. This is another one that is really common. And one of the things that we're seeing happening with personal branding right now is, well, a lot of people post content on social media, right? So whenever you go on social media, if you see anybody, okay, and like, prove me wrong, show me examples of how I'm completely wrong. But if you see anybody on social media, let's say LinkedIn, who's posted a lot and started getting a lot of likes and engagement and comments, that person by now has written on their LinkedIn that they're a personal branding expert, right? It's a thing. That's what people are saying right now. So there's a lot of messaging that we're receiving that says, start posting on LinkedIn. That will be day 1 of you building your personal brand. Or go on Clubhouse, build how to build your personal brand on Clubhouse. A brand has nothing to do with social media. They're very strong brands. I don't know, the Queen of England is a brand, not really on social media, right? Seth Godin he's a marketer, has a very strong brand. Social media for him is just to post links to his books and his content that lives off social media. Building a brand does not mean being on social media. Being on social media is you marketing yourself. That is then once you build the brand, and we'll talk about what a brand is. Now we're talking about what it's not. Then you leverage social media or not. We'll talk about different ways you can then self-market and promote yourself. Social media is, of course, one of the vehicles and certainly an extremely powerful one because of scale, right? But the two are not the same. Building a brand does not mean being on social media. So you'll see here an example. Your personal brand is in the middle, and then how you self-market and self-promote can take very different forms, including you see their community building. You could be hosting meetups in your area of expertise and become really known offline as an expert in your field or your domain. Okay, so we build a brand first, we market ourselves later. And then myth number 3, and this is where a lot of people hesitate to build a brand and then put themselves out there, is that we equate personal branding and just the wording of it, and then the concept of self-marketing with being a narcissist. So most of the clients that I have that I build personal brands with, not for, you can't build a brand for somebody, you build it with them. That is the most common concern that I have. Marina, I do not want to sound or be like, usually people say Donald Trump, but I can get all kinds of different examples. I just don't want the me, and I have a brand and all of that. But building a brand does not make you a narcissist. It does not make you be or appear like Donald Trump, unless you are like Donald Trump, because really your brand is really who you are inside, and then packaged, amplified, and shown to the world if you self-market, right? So if you are like that, everybody's going to see it. If you're not, you have nothing to worry about. And then here are the most common concerns people have with marketing themselves, putting themselves out there and standing out. A lot of people say, I'm a private person, Marina. I don't want to be putting myself out there because I don't want to be sharing my personal life. I don't want to be sharing what I do on the weekends. I don't want to be sharing stuff about my family. And again, the good news is you don't have to. When I show you what you look at when you're building your personal brand, you choose what you talk about. You choose what you share about yourself that showcases your brand. We are talking in the session about building your personal brand as a thought leader or expert, not as a social media influencer. That's a bit of a different ballgame. When you're a social media influencer, you're sharing, what coffee you're having, what lipstick you're wearing, where you bought your necklace, and all those different things. We're not talking about that. We're talking about career transformations. So we're talking about positioning yourself when you're building your brand as a thought leader or expert in your field, which means the good news is you do not have to share. You don't have to air your dirty laundry. You also don't have to post pictures of your kids and cats and everything that you do on the weekend. A lot of people say, I don't want to self-market because I'm an introvert, and that's a very common one, but there are lots of examples of really strong and powerful brands that we follow, people who inspire us, and they are introverts. Okay, so again, when you're building your self-marketing strategy, you build it within the constraints of what is authentic to you. Okay, and that is why the whole journey of building a personal brand is an exercise in introspection and authenticity. And that is why everything that you do and you build, you're not looking at what somebody else is doing and either emulating them or feeling too intimidated to emulate them. You design and construct it as your own journey that feels real and natural to you. And that is what people will gravitate towards. Okay. And then, of course, this is a very common one, and I get this a lot for people who work in corporate jobs, also in corporate jobs that have, for example, banking field, insurance, financial fields, where there are a lot of social media rules for employees and regulations. So often people say, if I start putting myself out there, if I start to self-market and self-promote, what is my employer going to think, right? And very often I hear dangerous advice. I hear a lot of personal branding advisors say, well, it doesn't matter. They should accept you for who you are. They should, accept you as you are. If you don't, just leave and find a place, that will accept you. Yes, in the ideal world, of course. But we have bills to pay, and we don't always live in the fictitious world where it's so easy to quit and find the job that will accept you as who you are. Yes, ideally, yes, but it's just not always feasible and doable, right? Which means we have to play by the rules of the organization that employs us. Yes, we have to find out what the rules are when you are self-promoting and self-marketing. And listen, we have to be respectful to the organization. Every now and then you create some content talking about how fantastic they are. If you believe it, right? You have to believe it. And then that can balance it out. But again, it is possible, as long as you know what those rules and constraints are, to then again, design your strategy around that. Again, you do not have to equate self-marketing to social media. There are a lot of different ways of building up your name, building your visibility and standing out, where your employer does not have to be staring at what you're doing at all times. Now, the important question of the day, and here's where I will ask you for some participation in the chat. What is a personal brand? To you, what does it mean? You came to the session, you saw it was personal branding, and you said, all right, it's personal branding. This is what the session is about. What is a personal brand? What's personal brand? And share in chat if you have any idea or associations. It's the identity or idea of what you do that people can connect with. Interesting. That's a very interesting one. Something meaningful, I like that. Connecting yourself to your values and your offerings, what you stand for, what ideas come to mind when I mention who I am, what I represent. Is what you sell yourself as to the public, your value, your field of expertise, who you are and what you value. Excellent. A lot of really good things. Your values, beliefs, and how you want to be known. Great. I love it. What am I known for? What you project on a consistent basis. Great. I love it. So let's look at the, first of all, where personal branding, the origins of personal branding. It seems like a really novel concept, right? It seems like it's something that we just started talking about. It seems fairly recent. It's not that recent. Let me tell you a tiny little bit of history of personal branding, and then I'll give you some of the definitions that I think will bring all of those amazing things that you were saying together. So this is Tom Peters. He's a best-selling author, and he is the man behind one of my favorite quotes, which is true leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. You might have seen this on social media. This every now and then does its rounds on social media and then goes away and then comes back. What people don't know, though, is that Tom Peters is also the one that coined the term personal branding in an article that appeared in Fast Company in 1997 called The Brand Called You. So what's interesting is that's when 1997 is when he started talking about the importance of becoming what he called the CEO of Me Inc. That idea of Me Inc., which in 1997 was very early to be talking about that. But now it has become paramount. This conference is about transformation, and we are undergoing a massive transformation in our employability, in the world of entrepreneurship. The world has changed. It has shifted, whether or not we like it. And we all of a sudden are finding ourselves becoming CEOs of Me Inc. because of the gig economy. Because all of a sudden, if we are entrepreneurs, we have to find a way to stand out. If we are job seekers, we have to find a way to stand out. If we are employed, we have to find a way to stand out. The days of us being in a company and retiring there, you know, with a gold watch, if you were, I don't know which anniversary, those days are over, right? Whether or not we like it, and sometimes change is hard, and sometimes it doesn't make us that excited, but those days are over. And the days of being the CEO of Me Inc. now are really, really here. So the definition of personal branding, here's one that I really like, and it is a more academic definition. And then I'll give you one that will just be simple and memorable. Okay, this is a more academic definition, but you will see that it brings together a lot of the things that you just mentioned in chat, a lot of the things that you shared. So a personal brand is a set of your unique characteristics. And those characteristics are some of the things you were mentioning. Those are your core values. Those are your core beliefs. That is your personality. So your unique characteristics rendered into a differentiated brand story. So it needs to be packaged, right? All of that needs to be packaged, because you have your core values, you have your beliefs, you have your personality, you have your experience, you have all those different things, but they all need to be packaged together so that they can become a brand. With the goal, because okay, what's the goal, right? We're packaging it into a brand, but for what purpose? With the intent of establishing ourselves as thought leaders or experts. Okay, I'm dropping influencers again for the sake of this conversation, but thought leaders or experts. And this can be intimidating, but this is really crucial and important. We're seeing a lot of people, especially on social media, having a lot of loud voices and a lot of content and maybe a lot of engagement they're getting, but they're not necessarily building a brand because they're not establishing themselves as thought leaders or experts. And this, for building a personal brand, is paramount, because otherwise it becomes a lot of hot air. And you'll see that here it says in the minds of the target audience. And that is really interesting because it keeps again, the target of your personal brand quite wide. A personal brand can be suitable if you're an entrepreneur and your audience is customers. A personal brand could be suitable if you are looking for a job. And so you leverage a personal brand for your job hunt. Personal brand is really useful when you work within an organization, especially when it's a large and corporate big organization, so that you're able to stand out internally. But also it could be neither of that. It could be that you're developing your personal brand with a target audience being people you want to inspire, people you want to impact. We'll be talking a little bit about that as well. But so now to really simplify this complex definition, I'll give you a really simple one. Your personal brand is your differentiator. Your personal brand is your differentiator. It's what makes it clear to people what makes you unique. It's your differentiator. And so again, a personal brand is in the middle, and then that is your differentiator, what makes you unique. Replacement of the very old and dated elevator pitch, if you will, that's in the middle. And then around it is how you choose to self-market. Are you doing outreach to people? You're creating video, you are building, communities offline, you are on social media, you decide how to self-market. And so again, to drive home the difference between a brand and the difference between branding and marketing, here's one of my favorite quotes. And the quote is, marketing is asking someone out on a date. Brand is the reason they say yes. Okay, so the brand is your differentiator. Marketing is you going out there promoting yourself, right? Self-promoting. Brand is the reason they say yes. Okay, so if you're an entrepreneur and you're marketing, it's your brand. The brand is why customers come to you. If you're looking for a job and you promote, your brand has people come to you and say yes. Okay, so the difference between marketing and branding. Now, there has been a surge in interest in personal branding, especially versus corporate branding. I don't know if you've noticed that, but the stats point to that. And we just see the surge in people becoming less and less trusting of corporate brands and becoming interesting in other people in personal brands. There was this one stat that I read, and I thought that was really mind-blowing. It said that 96% of people would not trust a message from a corporate, let's say social media page or corporate message, but would rather trust a message from another person on the same topic, even a person they don't know, right? And that, by the way, is starting to be less relevant to the influencer culture, because now we're looking at the influencers. We're seeing that they're more like corporate. We trust them less. They get paid to promote, so we trust it less. But people become more interested and trusting of other people. And so look at this. I find it always interesting to compare and look at those numbers, and those numbers are changing all the time. If you look at the following that Tesla and SpaceX have on Twitter combined, it's 28 million followers. Okay, so not too shabby. If any of you are entrepreneurs, we want that following too for our corporate brands, 28.2. But if you look at the following that Elon Musk has on Twitter, it's more than double, right? And those are unique followers, right? The two corporate brands, there's a lot of overlap, more than double. You look at the following that Spanx, the famous shapewear brand, has on LinkedIn, 54,000 followers. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, over 1 million, 1.3 million. You look at the Virgin Group, and here we'll look at all of the different, they have banners, sub-banners, there's mobile, there's this, there's that, all of their different brands, over 2 million, Richard Branson, over 12 million. So our interest in personal branding and personal brands is certainly growing. So now, what does any of that have to do with you? Okay, so now I explained to you what a personal brand is. And now the question is, why build a personal brand? Why is it relevant to you? And here are the 3 main reasons that I would propose should inspire you, hopefully by the end of the session, if you aren't inspired already, to build a personal brand and also to self-market. So number 1, to build a network. You know the saying, if you've been to any of my talks before, you've heard this, our network is our net worth. I learned that as an immigrant when I came to Canada and realized that as an immigrant, you become really net poor very quickly. You don't know anybody. You can't turn to anybody for any question. And you know that 80% of jobs are filled without being advertised, right? So it all becomes about building a network and having a network. It helps employability. Studies show that it helps promotability as well. You know, we all hope when we are employed that we will do excellent work and we will get noticed. And then unfortunately, that's not always the case, right? So when we build our personal brand, meaning we build our differentiator, we build visibility for ourselves, it aids promotability. And if we're entrepreneurs, it helps client acquisition. Building a personal brand, having a brand helps offset bias. And look, I could deliver a completely separate talk about bias in the workspace, bias in hiring. I've faced it, I've seen it. I've recruited for hundreds of companies across Canada, and I've seen all kinds of bias. And you know what happens with bias is I've learned that most people are well-meaning. And bias comes from just not knowing what to expect. At least you can call me naive. You can write something in chat right now and say, you're so naive, Marina. These people, they're just all, mean and terrible. But I believe that it's just not knowing. Very many times it's happened to me where a hiring manager I would work with, I would present a candidate and they would say, oh, do you have somebody who's local, somebody who's from here? And I would say, well, but you're saying it to me, Marina Byezhanova, I'm not that local, I'm not that from here. And inevitably, people always say, oh my God, no, somebody like you, I would hire in an instant. And the reason they say that is not because I am so amazing. Maybe I am, but maybe I'm not. But the reason they say that is because they get to know me. When we are applying for jobs, when we are trying to build a network and all people see is a cold piece of paper and their name, they assume a lot of things. They assume that maybe because you're older, that you are, I don't know, boring or not tech savvy. They assume that because you're young, you're not mature. They assume that because your last name is Byezhanova, you can't speak English to save your life. There are a lot of assumptions. When we build and we can argue how that is not fair and it should not be like that. It should not be like that, but it is like that. So when we build a personal brand, we give ourselves an opportunity to show who we are beyond the scope of a name or just a sheet of paper. And then finally, and this is the most important one to me. This might not be the most important one to you, but it is the reason I give those talks. And it is the reason that I'm so passionate about personal branding. When you build a personal brand, you find a voice and you use your voice. And when you find your voice and you use your voice, you have an opportunity to inspire others. You have an opportunity to impact others. It gives you an opportunity to have other people say, oh my God, I relate. And because you said that, you shared your story, you put yourself out there, I feel that I can too. And that is extremely priceless. I come from the Soviet Union, a land of ultimate censorship. I know what it is like not to have a voice. It pains me to see how many of us self-censor and not use our voice because of so many self-limiting beliefs, or we don't know how. When we build a brand, when we're clear on what our differentiator is, when we're clear on what we could be talking about, we find a voice, we can use that voice. And beyond building a network and helping us find jobs and land clients and all the different things that, hey, are still very important. We all have bills to pay in our own ways, but it gives us a voice and that becomes really priceless. So now that I've convinced you that you must build a personal brand, or at least, convinced you to open your mind to it, how do we build a personal brand? So there are four really core components of a strong personal brand. You need to have some kind of an expertise, right? As I mentioned, a personal brand is rooted in expertise or thought leadership and/or. If you don't have an expertise yet, you can share your journey of becoming an expert in something, but it has to be clear and expert in what. Again, we're talking corporate side and entrepreneurship. We're not talking, lifestyle influencers in this conversation. Self-awareness is number two. Can't build a brand if you don't know who you are inside, right? And a lot of you, when I asked you what a personal brand is, you said, it's the values, it's what makes me, this, it's my core values. But if you don't know any of those things, if you're not clear on who you are, there is no brand. A personal brand is not an externally constructed entity. A personal brand is different than corporate branding. There's a debate. Is it constructed? Is it inside out? A personal brand is in you. It is you. It's just the process of extracting it, packaging it, and then scaling it in the way that makes sense to you. You need to have very clear brand positioning. We'll talk a little bit about that. And your stories. Stories is what people relate to. Stories are what really make us relatable, human to people. And that's when people feel a relationship, a connection with their personal brand. So those are the 4 main components. Now here are steps to take, and I'm going to be giving you examples of a lot of exercises that you can do. So take out pen and paper or rewatch this recording after, or if you're really just chilling, send me a message after and I'll send you some of those exercises. Step number 1 is introspection. So this is very interesting. So as Greg mentioned, when he introduced me, I run a personal branding agency. It's called Brandable Leader. If ever you're working on your personal brand, you feel completely stuck, you want somebody to do it with you. Shameless plug, brandableleader.com. This is the service that we offer. But I'm sharing with you all of the steps that we take. So you could do it yourself as well. So when people come to me and they say, Marina, I want to build a personal brand and I want to have visibility. Let's get started. I'm so excited. Usually when you reach out for a service, you're really eager, right? Like by that point you've thought about it, you're eager. What are we doing? Like, what should I be on TikTok? Should I be on LinkedIn? Do you think Clubhouse? Should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? And I already told you that I believe in first building a brand, then marketing a brand. So I say, no, the first thing that we do is we go through a period of introspection. We go through steps together, working on a lot of self-digging and self-analysis. And that takes 8 weeks. And usually I see faces go down like, oh, I thought I would start posting and putting myself out there. I got mentally prepared to be doing that. I'm ready. 8 weeks of what? It feels like 8 weeks of really psychoanalysis because we dig really deep. However, at the end of this process, every single person without fail says, thank God I did it. I would have been doing something really random had I not done this process yet first. Okay, so introspection first. There are several things that you look at in that process of introspection. So with our clients, those are the exercises we go through. So I'm telling you what they are so that you can do them yourself. So number 1, you have to find your purpose, your why in Simon Sinek's words, so that it gives a narrative and the story to what it is that you're doing. This is really hard. This is the hardest, and this is the most important. Okay, I'll give you 2 exercises that you can do that can help you with this. Exercise number 1 is, it's called the Lifeline. You take a wide horizontal sheet of paper, you put a line in the middle, and you put at the top and higher, if those were higher, lower, if those were lower, at the top, all of the main highlights, high moments of your life. Okay. And really things, I mean, I would admit the more like the birth of my kid, or I got married, like other stuff. Okay. And then you put all of the lowest points of your life. Again, not necessarily like divorce or somebody passed away, other things. And then and that takes a lot of time, right? Live long lives, a lot of things happen. And then you look for common denominators. Okay, you're looking for common denominators. It isn't those common denominators. It isn't those things that you say, okay, wow, these are my highlights. These are things that really marked me in a positive way. Those are things that really knocked me down in life and really hurt and were painful. And then you ask yourself, why? What are the common denominators? That is how I, many years ago, found out that my why has something to do with the concept of voice. All of my highlights were, I gave a talk here. This person said I inspired them. I launched a podcast. Again, you're looking for common denominators. They're not all going to be connected, right? Again, we're complex individuals. There will be different things, but you're looking for something dominant. And then I noticed that a lot of my low points had to do with this, not having a voice, feeling that there's some variation of not having a voice. You're looking for yours. You're looking for that common denominator. That is where you start finding your purpose, your why. That is what makes you tick. Okay. The second exercise is actually from Simon Sinek's book. So he has one that says, there's find your why. And what's your why? Anyways, it's the second book. That's the worksheets and how to actually work on finding your why. And here's one exercise that's really powerful. It's called 7 Whys. It's used in corporate branding quite a bit as well. You ideally do this exercise with somebody else and not somebody close to you, okay? Not your spouse, not your kid, not your significant other, not your best friend, nobody who thinks they know you better than you know yourself, okay? So nobody like that. An acquaintance who cares enough to do this with you. You sit down with them and you have them ask you the first question, why is it that you do what you do in life? You respond to them. And then they ask you, well, why do you do it? Why is it important? And you say, well, because no. And they are a skeptical friend. They're playing the role of a skeptical friend. They're saying, but so why? Who cares? Why do you do it? And you explain and they say, but so what? So why? They do it 7 times. By the 7th time, it gets really annoying, but you're digging really deep. You start really, really thinking, okay? Again, why you do this with somebody who doesn't know you that well? Because someone who knows you that well will start explaining to you and telling you that's not good. You don't want somebody who just starts projecting onto you because they know everything about you. You don't want that. The second component that we'll look at with our clients is who are the people that inspire them and why? Be it influencers online, or be it people in their personal lives, be it people in their workplace. So this is the question. This is another exercise I encourage you to do. Sit down and write out names of people who inspire you, and then look at why they inspire you and look for common denominators. You might see, for example, in your case, Guy, you might see that it's all people who are funny. And so you say, okay, well, when I'm going to be building my personal brand, I'm going to make sure that it's predicated on humor because I value that. For some clients, they look at something and they say, well, what these people have in common is they're all very down to earth and they really like that. Well, if you gravitate towards that, then probably you will want your personal brand to be showcasing that as well. Now, we sometimes gravitate towards complete opposite of who we are. We cannot fake a brand. So if you're seeing that you're right, like maybe I'm attracted to everybody who's really funny because I'm really not funny. But so as much as I can try, I'm really not, but thank you. But a brand has to be authentic, right? So you have to have enough self-awareness to see. But if those are people that you find relatable, look at why. Those will be components of your personal brand. Core values. Core values, a few of you mentioned. I love that. That's really important. When I asked you what is a personal brand, a few of you mentioned the concept of core values. Core values are really important for a variety of reasons. First of all, those are, and we'll talk about, I'll have to give you an example, because when we talk about core values, usually we play very safe and surface. In personal branding, we can't do that. With any of those things that we're talking about, we have to dig deep and get uncomfortable, okay? So if I ask you, what are your core values? And you say it's family, integrity, I don't know, teams and whatever, that's surface. That serves no purpose for this in this case. That doesn't make a difference. That's not relatable. And it's also not clear. Because if you tell me my core value is, I don't know, humor, let's say, okay, that's cool, but humor what? Like what? Like humor in every situation, you never get upset, you turn everything into what? It has to be really clear. So your core values have to meet a few criteria. They have to be in the form of not one word, because that doesn't mean anything to anyone. They have to be in the form of a statement. It has to be really clear. Your core values also cannot all be self-serving. Core values, and this is one quote I always share in the words of Pat Lencioni, a business writer, business author. Core values need to have the ability to inflict you pain. Meaning, for example, if your core value is family, that means, or then let's say we expand it, family first, no matter what. Hey, it's got to be no matter what, right? There can be exceptions. It can mean that you're presented with an opportunity to do something really amazing, like relocate to a country of your dreams and I don't know what, and you have to leave your family behind for 2 years, and you're going to reject that flat out. You're going to say no, because family first. Okay. So your core values are 100%, no matter what, even if it sucks, even if it's unpleasant, it's your core value. And they cannot be saved because they have to really communicate to people who you are. So it's better that you have 2 core values that you put out in the world, 3 core values, and have a long list of every virtue, and you feel very self-virtuous about them and having those amazing core values, but it's very clear to people who you are. One of my core values, I shared it in our panel, Guy, is censorship is evil. So censorship is evil. I put it out there, you get an idea of who I am. You're either on board or you're against. So So core values have to be in forms of sentences, really clear. Descriptors is a really important one as well. So your brand descriptors. How do you want to be perceived and described? One of you said that when I asked you for a definition of a personal brand. That's great. You said how people describe me. Well, how do people describe you? And does it align with how you want to be described? Okay, so people in general might be describing you in a very pleasant way, but is this how you want to be described? Now, a personal brand is built on authenticity, right? Built on top of authenticity, really important, has to be real. But again, we are complex individuals. We could be described not in 4 ways and not in 5 ways, but in 100 different ways, right? But for a clearly positioned personal brand, we have to choose only several words. And this is because we want to create brand clarity. And that is how we want people to describe us. So here's a little exercise. You write down a list of your brand descriptors. You say, now that I'm going to be building a personal brand, I'm being presumptuous here that you're going to. Now that I'm going to build a personal brand, I want people to describe me as, and you choose your words, okay? And you choose words that you don't want to be synonymous with. This is really important too. And not those obvious ones. So for example, I want to be, let's say again, described as, I keep picking on you, Guy, but let's say as funny. I don't want to be described as boring. Okay, well, obvious, like you want to be funny, you don't, right, that's obvious. But for example, funny, but not unserious, right? Like you want to be described as funny, but also somebody serious. Also, I want to be described as funny, but not fluffy, right? So you think of those different things, right? So for example, I want to be described as outspoken, but I don't want to be described as somebody who is a big mouth. Okay, so there's a difference, right? So you do that. Write your list, make it short, 3 to 5 words. And then here's part 2 of that exercise. You text and message everybody you can, and you say, hey, when you think of me, what are the first 3 words that come to mind? And you look to see if there's an overlap, okay? It could be, it's a very pleasant exercise. Unless you're doing it anonymous, you're getting all kinds of pleasant things. It's a feel-good exercise, with the exception of a couple of friends who are, extra funny and they're going to say just, random things. It's a feel-good exercise, but you want to see if it aligns. If everybody says describe you as nice, but you want to be described as, I don't know, intelligent or creative, then there's something, right? You have to, it's an exercise in self-awareness. Either you're not noticing something, or you're just not putting yourself out there and showing. You're leading with something that you don't necessarily want to be leading with, because you wrote your list. You wrote how you want to be described. The next step is you look at your core audience. Who are you going to be when you start self-marketing, you're building your brand? Who is your audience? And I recommend not more than 2. Okay. So if you are building, and it all depends, or you can ask them, who should be my audience? It depends on your goals. If your goals are you work within a huge corporate organization and you want to grow internally, well, part of your audience will be internal leadership, right? And then your strategy will be according. Your core audience could be, if you are promoting yourself or promoting a gig that you're building on the side, your core audience is a prospective customer. But again, your core audience can be people that you could inspire and impact. And I always come back to that. The strongest personal brands are brands that are rooted in desire to inspire, impact, and help. Okay. And usually those are people who are in the same situation as you. So you become relatable to them, or people who are in the situation you were in before. The up and comers in your field, people who, maybe struggled with the struggle right now with something you struggled in the past. So I encourage you to make your audience, core audience number 2, people that you want to impact. And then finally, what are you an expert in? Okay, this is an intimidating exercise because we all suffer from some sort of an imposter syndrome. But what are you an expert in? And try to make it more narrow and specific. Those are the exercises in introspection. You can always send me an email or message me on LinkedIn after the session, and I can send you those exercises, the worksheets. So just say, hey, Marina, send me the worksheets, and I will send them to you so you can work through them. The second part is brand positioning. So now you took all of those components, you need to put them into something succinct. Again, brand positioning sounds overwhelming, right? Like sounds like intimidating. Brand position, what would be your brand position? And everybody feels intimidating. Again, replace the usual elevator pitch concept that's outdated and uncomfortable. And perhaps think of it as in, if somebody asks you, hey, what do you do? Your reply. Usually we give two kinds of replies. Either something very specific, what do you do? I'm a systems administrator, or I'm an executive assistant, and that's it. And that's not really a differentiator, right? And it's just a little bit boring. So the person's like, okay, that's cool. Which company, or where do you work? And like, whatever. Or we go into something really convoluted, right? Well, right now I'm at the crossroads. I'm working at this company, but also on the side, I help organizations with whatever, blah, 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 and then you lose the person and then the people are gone, right? So the whole goal with developing a personal brand and then developing brand positioning is responding with something that's really catchy and simple, okay? So first, you have a one-liner. That's a response that ideally when someone says, hey, what do you do? You're able to respond in a one sentence way that makes the person go, not like, but like, oh, tell me more. What does it mean? Oh, that's cool. Tell me more about it, right? So when I tell people, when I respond this question by saying, I help people find their voice and scale its reach, or I help people stand out, well, then inevitably people say like, what does that mean? What do you do exactly? How do you do that? And then you have a short bio, and then you can jump into saying, well, I started a personal branding agency and what we do, and you can explain a bit more. But at that point, also the person was interested because they asked you the follow-up question. And then your hashtags, things that, kind of package again, if you're going to be self-marketing on social media, things that really instantaneously position you and brand you in a really catchy way. One of the hashtags that we designed for a client is one level extra. She is extra. She is very extra. So she now even uses it in sentences, right? All of her content, everything that she puts out, she has branded herself even more with that than with her one-liner. She's one level extra. This part is hard. I do have an exercise that I'm able to send you on this. If you're interested, do let me know. But this is usually where you can work with somebody who's really creative, or you work with the brand of a leader, plug number 2, and we help you design this. Or as I said, you can work with somebody creative to help you but first to do all of the introspection. You can't shortcut. You can't go to somebody, even somebody who is in branding or somebody super creative, and be like, hey, can you help me come up with a one-liner and a hashtag? I'll just quickly tell you what I do. No, nobody can do that. You do all of that introspection first, then you bring it to somebody and you're like, boom, how do we package this into something really creative and really edgy? Okay. And then finally, and only now, self-marketing. Okay, so all of that before you go, okay, so is it going to be Clubhouse? Is it going to be LinkedIn? Should it be on Twitter? Should it be on Instagram? Should it be on Facebook? Should I do stories? Should I do videos? Should I do short form content? Should I do all of that is in self-marketing. Okay, essentially self-marketing is creating content. It's not only content online, it can definitely be content offline as well, but it's creating content. So when you are creating content, we're still going to go over time, even though I'm speaking fast. I'm going to speak even faster. So when you're creating content, here's something that's really important. Okay, this is really, really important. This is going to be an important takeaway, so I can't remove it. When you are creating content, when you are putting yourself out there, you really want to marry your brain and your soul. Okay. You really want to identify your content pillars. And if you are creating content online, you only talk about those topics. You don't talk about anything else. Okay. So I'll give you a quick example. So Richard Branson, he has his brain pillar that gives him credibility, is that he's a really successful entrepreneur, right? Successful entrepreneur, whatever, space now, all those different things. But what makes him relatable is not that. It's not that he's a successful businessman, successful entrepreneur. It's his human side, right? He's crazy. He's like running naked somewhere. He's a social entrepreneur. He's doing all kinds of things. It's the combination of two that make him unique and that make his personal brand really strong. Cheryl Sandberg, on one hand, she's CEO of Facebook. That gives her credibility, right? But that's not why people know her name, really. That's not why people follow her. There are a lot of CEOs of really big companies. Nobody knows about them. She wrote the book Lean In. She talks a lot about gender parity, and that's what makes her interesting and humanizes, right? So what's interesting is if you only lean into your thought leadership and you only talk about topics around your expertise, they build you as an expert, but that is a boring expert. So they're not necessarily building a following. It becomes a little bit too boring. If you only run around naked and talk about gender parity and there's no credibility there, it might create some buzz for a bit, but it fizzles out because there's no credibility, right? But when you bring the two together, that is where the real magic happens. Okay. So the next thing that I want you to do is to identify what will be your thought leadership, your expertise building pillar. Okay. One or two, not more than that. This usually should be an easier one to answer. It's what you do, right? So you have to talk about what you do and show that you're good at what you do, right? If you're not good at what you do, you need to improve that first, right? You need to showcase that. And then you talk about, again, it's one or two, not more than that. So it can be like variations of everything that you know. And then one or two pillars that humanize you, that make you interesting and make you relatable. And you tell stories under those umbrellas only. Okay, this makes it hard and easy. So for example, mine, and if you follow me on social media, you've already known that, it's immigrant life and it's inspirational stories, right? The struggle of the juggle is another name that I have for it. I have two businesses, I have two kids, I'm doing a master's degree, I'm constantly losing my mind, something's always happening, now I'm stuck in the US, things are always happening. So struggle of the juggle, but with an inspirational component, not in the downer component. But I don't talk about anything else. And I am interested in other things too, right? I am interested in gender parity. I have a lot of stories about women in business and facing, challenges as a woman in business as well. But I don't talk about them because it dilutes. You can't talk about everything. Then that's when you become synonymous with being a person who talks about everything. And you want your brand to be really clearly defined. So two content pillars that position you as an expert, two that humanize you and make you relatable to people. And again, only then you're now seeing the slide for the third time, because if one thing you will remember today is that you build the brand first, it's an exercise in introspection, and only then you decide how you're going to market yourself. My mission, as I already shared with you, is to help people find their voice and use it to stand out. Find their voice and use it to stand out. And here's one of my favorite quotes on the topic. It's from highly beloved Robin Williams. You must strive to find your own voice, because the longer you wait to begin, the less likely you are to find it at all. So I really hope that if I inspired you with anything today, it's to consider finding your own voice. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was quite to the point and delivered within the hour. I'm quite impressed. Marina, we have some questions that came up before the meeting that people submitted during their registration. People certainly can add their questions if any occur to them in the chat. We'll be watching that. Do you mind if I pass those questions along? Okay.
Of course.
All right. So how does personal branding advice for women differ to your advice for men?
Well, that's a really, really loaded question there.
Yeah,
but
I
I
saw
like
that
it.
one.
I'm only keeping this slide on, by the way, so that you can all take down my information. That is my cell phone number. Please don't call me in the middle of the night, but please feel free to text me. It's a really interesting question. My advice does not differ at all. I give exactly the same advice to men and women. My empathy is certainly different. I learned that in North America, well, other cultures as well, but what I'm trying to say is differently from where I'm from. Women are socialized to keep quiet, to not be too loud, to not stick out, to not stand out, to not appear as aggressive if they're loud, to not sit at the head of the table, to just, really, not put themselves out there very much. It was a cultural shock for me. Back where I'm from in the Soviet Union, also have Jewish women. We're allowed, we take up space. So to me, that was an interesting thing to learn. When I read Cheryl Sandberg's Lean In, I didn't understand it. And I called my sister and I said, I didn't understand. And then I said, I didn't either, but I can tell you why. And so she told me about, the cultural complexities and differences as well. But I do have that empathy. I do believe that women also struggle from the imposter syndrome more than men. Although that makes it a lot harder for men because very many men struggle from imposter syndrome too, and self-doubt, and then are more intimidated to admit it than we are as women, because for women it's become more normal to talk about it, right? More socially acceptable. So it's really interesting. The work that I do with people, when I work with people on their personal branding, it's one-on-one work. And before we get to the tactical and the tangible of personal branding, I really do feel like I'm a psychoanalyst. There are tears. There's a lot of sharing. There's a lot of, I don't want to put myself out there because my dad always told me to sit down and keep quiet and go do the dishes. Because of this and because of that and cultural and who am I, those questions of who am I, they're gender agnostic, but women at the very least, maybe not suffer from it more, but admit it more. So I have conversations about imposter syndrome and all those with women more than men, but my advice is always the same. It's very basic and simple. Do it because you must. We only have one thing with us forever. One, it's ourselves. It's our name, right? Jobs
Absolutely.
will lose, businesses will lose, nothing stays, right? Our name stays. That's our equity, and we can invest in that, and we can also inspire other people along the way, which is a nice bonus.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I just wanted to mention for those who need to go, totally respect that. Marina, are you available for a few more minutes to answer some other questions?
Definitely.
Okay. There's one question someone asked: how do you use your personal brand to advance your career?
Oh my God, with everything. So first of all, 80% of jobs are filled without being advertised. Right? It's just the truth. So when you stand out, and personal branding is about standing out, right? Personal branding and self-marketing is about standing out. It becomes easier to get a job because you can network, you can reach out to people, people know you, and then a lot more opportunities come to you. So that makes a big difference too, right? That's number one. So as far as job search, makes a huge, humongous difference. Again, 80% of jobs, hidden job market. Most are not advertised. So building a network becomes everything. When you have a brand, you build a network, it's your differentiator. And then also it helps with promotability. And there have been studies that have shown that as well. People are not promoted based on merit most of the time. Again, we can sit down and talk about how that sucks, and it shouldn't be like that. Like bias sucks too, and I've been a victim of it many times. It sucks, but it is the truth. People are not promoted based on merit. We have no choice but to build ourselves, build our visibility, show our differentiators, get noticed, and then be promoted, and then reap those benefits as a result.
Okay, and funny that you mentioned bias, because Tina had mentioned earlier in the presentation today. She said, "Could you set up a webinar on bias?" Because that sounds like a really interesting topic. So
I have so many stories on that. Oh my God, I've heard it all, and not even only personal stories. So obviously personal stories, but also I own a headhunting firm, and I've done recruitment for over 10 years. I have heard everything. There is a form of a bias against absolutely everybody. It doesn't matter. There's always a group of people or a person that will feel that this age bracket is wrong, this gender is wrong, this name is wrong. There's always something is wrong. So I have stories for days and days on that, unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't know how many people understand French on this presentation, but there's an expression, ça prend toutes sortes de monde pour faire un monde. So I guess there's always going to be one kind of person that it just keeps things interesting, I imagine. Another question, what do you do when you do multiple things like business, artificial intelligence, and poetry? I imagine that kind of complicates the introspection about what makes you an expert in.
Yes and no, because there's still an overarching theme. And that's what you need to find out. And that's, again, why introspection becomes so important. There is a reason why you gravitate towards artificial intelligence and why you gravitate towards poetry and why you gravitate. There is, I guarantee you, there's a common denominator. Once you uncover that common denominator, that is your brand, right? So if I look at, for example, the businesses that, well, so I have a headhunting firm, I have a personal branding agency, I choose leadership roles with entrepreneurs organization, but I choose the roles that call my name, that I gravitate towards, right? So if I look at all those, I'm doing a master's degree, you know, on separate topic. If I look at all of those different things, I see that the common denominator is always helping people find their voice and stand out in one way or another, right? So being able to uncover that common denominator, that's what becomes really priceless, and that becomes your brand. So a lot of people can fall under it. Now, how do you create, let's say, content under it to position yourself as an expert? You still position yourself as an expert in something based on your goals. So if your goals are to develop your, let's say, I was going to say poetry career, but I think that doesn't make sense. Develop yourself as a poet, and that's, you want to be, I don't know, noticed, you want to be published, then that's your audience. Then you're positioning yourself as, you know, expert in that and in another topic. But you choose a couple. As I mentioned to you, it's 2 topics on expertise, 2 that make you relatable. Otherwise, it's all over the place. And the brand is what glues those things together and keeps them together.
Okay. Diana, I see you raised your hand.
Yes, we do have a question on Facebook Live. Someone is asking you how many years have you been working on your personal brand? And to anyone, if you can calculate like a maximum or a minimum or an average of years that it takes of work building your personal brand.
My whole life. Well, the brand is me, right? Your brand is you. Greg's brand is him. So we work on it our whole life. But when did I consciously realize that I would start working on my personal brand was a few years ago. And I can tell you that to me, it did not happen intentionally. So what happened was, so I'll tell you just very briefly a little bit of my story to give context. So born in the Soviet Union, always felt like a kid that had a lot to say and had a ton of opinions, but had to always mute it because teachers in the Soviet Union and post-Soviet Ukraine, they lower your grades. If your opinion doesn't match theirs, they lower your grades. So you have to always keep it quiet. You know, my dad's Jewish. So like also like just being under the radar, always suppressing, always had this, you know, having to suppress my voice and what I have to say. Came to Canada, felt like, oh my God, liberty. Another super quick story. First day in CJEP, 8 a.m. class. We came to Canada in end of June. This is August. I was petrified to go to school because I just didn't want to speak. Nobody could understand what I said because I had the thickest accent on earth, or so it seemed to me. And so I was just petrified that people would make fun of me. And so I didn't sleep all night because I didn't want the teacher to make me speak. So I sat in the back of the class and I just prayed to be invisible. All night I prayed to be invisible. Morning, going there, I felt like a soldier going to work, and I just wanted to be invisible. I sit in class, it's film class. Why am I taking film class when I can't understand anything? It's because everything else was taken. Because by the time I arrived in Canada, it was last minute, everything was taken. So anyways, I'm in film class. It's black and white film. Cannot understand rookie mistake. No, it wasn't a rookie mistake. It's because nothing else was available. I'm not a morning person. There's nothing else. So anyways, we're watching a film. It's black and white. I couldn't understand anything in color unless there were captions at all. And it's black and white on like a screen, old 50s movie. I understand nothing. I sit there for an hour and a half sweating. Everybody else went to sleep, like all the others, like teenagers, right? Like everybody put 2 chairs together. 2 people watching, myself and the instructor, we're staring at the screen, we're watching. The film ends, she turns on the lights. All I can think about is, please don't notice me. Like, I am invisible, do not notice me. I don't want to speak. And then she says, okay, guys, who did not like the film and why? And I couldn't believe that question. And I'm 16 years old, but I kid you not, I'm sitting there, and this is like a really messed up 16-year-old, in my opinion, because all I could think about, and I literally felt it go on my forehead, is democracy. This is democracy. She's asking who didn't like it because we're allowed not to like something that she liked, and we're allowed to say it. And I go like this. Not because I didn't like it, I didn't understand it, but because I could. So I just go like this. And I thought everybody would go like that, by the way, because everybody was sleeping. So I'm like, they didn't like it. She's going to call on them. I'm the only one. Everybody looks at me. Everybody's like, like, look at that loser. And she's like, interesting. Please tell me why. And then I had like 20 minutes from hell and it was terrible. But anyways, I always had that burning desire to speak up and to have an opinion and to be able to speak. And then as an immigrant for many years, I couldn't do that because, you know, when people can't understand what you're saying, they lose interest. And then it becomes hard. So when time came, I worked a lot on my accent and speaking and, you know, doing public speaking trainings, etc. So when time came that I managed to be understood, all I wanted to do was to put myself out there and speak and connect with people and write and do all those different things. Then once I started doing that, just because I could, I had this precious, you know, right, I could do it. Because I started doing that, a lot of things started happening. I started building a network. I started getting business opportunities. I started getting featured in Forbes and Inc. and being invited to speak and speaking globally. All those things started happening, but not because it was my goal to become a speaker or to become an author or to be, no, I just wanted to talk publicly and people to listen. And then that built into a personal brand. And even there were a lot of lessons learned. I used to hide that I was an immigrant still. Like, I don't care about the accent of my last name. I would be like, no, I'm from here. You know, I was embarrassed until I realized it is being an immigrant. It is being different and unique. That's interesting to people. And then it started building my brand around those things. So I would say my whole life, but tangibly, practically in the last 5 years, how long does it take for somebody to do it? To package, identify, define what your brand is, it takes 8 weeks if you work with Brand of a Leader. Plug number 3.
Or is it 3?
It's the third, everything comes in threes. But to then self-market takes as long as it takes, depending on your goals, right? And that becomes a different beast.
An interesting segue to that is for the younger members of the audience who are either probably still in school or just starting their career. This person asked, how do you create a personal brand when your career is just beginning?
So same, and it will be the last question I will answer, but I'm
Okay.
available to all of you. You know, Greg, you've known me for many years. You know, I reply to every single message.
Yeah.
So please don't hesitate. Same thing, a lot of introspection and expecting that things also change and adjust, right? Your content pillars of what you're putting out, they're going to change. When you're just starting out, it's going to be more your journey. It's going to be more you leaning into expertise of others. So if you are, let's say, building expertise, let's say you just graduated in marketing and you want to build yourself up and your visibility as an expert in marketing, you're not yet. Please do not pretend. Again, personal branding is authenticity. Do not pretend. But that's what you're building an expertise in. And again, marketing, I'm keeping it wide, but keep it narrow. Marketing, what kind? There are different ways of creating content around that pillar without you pretending to know something, okay? Because nobody wants that. You can be sharing stories, you can be, you know, expressing opinions, but you can also create, for example, instead of creating posts and writing articles about topics you don't know about, you can create an interview series and you can interview experts in that particular domain. And then you start building your expertise by association, by associating yourself with those people. Also a fantastic way to network, right? This is when you reach out to people and you say, I want to interview you for whatever reason. We're all vain, eh? 90% of people say yes. You reach out for like virtual coffee, or I want to pick your brain, or can we like meet? Like, crickets. Can I interview for an article I'm writing? Can I interview for like a quick whatever podcast, whatever? 9 out of 10 anecdotal evidence. You get a yes. So your expertise, you choose that pillar depending on what you're building a career in. You don't pretend. You find different ways of self-marketing that make it authentic and make it clear that you're still, experiencing a journey.
Very interesting. Great answer. I wish, going back to my university days, I had a teacher with your energy at this time of night, because some of the evening classes I took, those were hard to get through. So thank you for taking the time to join us all the way from Florida. That's quite something. So you had a nice stable internet connection it came through quite clearly. So there you
Thank
go.
you. I was nervous that they shut it off at some point, or I'm also mildly nervous they might have shut down this co-working space and like lock the doors, and I'm going to try to find my way out, but I'm sure all will be well.
Great. Diana, did you want to add anything before we wrap it up?
Good. Thank you so much. I learned a lot from you. I think I'm going to rewatch this session, and I'm going to do a lot of introspection in the upcoming days. Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to hear that. That's the best thing I could hear. If any of you feel that you're going to be also digging deep, doing self-digging introspection, just let me know. Drop me a line and tell me that that's what you're going to be doing, because that's why I was here.
Absolutely. Got a lot of thank yous in the chat. And Guy, Guy thinks you are funny.
That is funny.
And that goes back to a previous presentation, folks. That's an inside joke. All right. So thank you again. And thank you, Kath, for inviting me, I should say, to introduce Marina to this group. It was a really, an honor to do that. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have an
Thank you.
excellent evening and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you,
You too.
everybody. And we hope to see you around tomorrow for more events. We have 13 events in our lineup. So I invite you to go to our website, check it out, register, because the fun is still going. So
Absolutely.
hope to
I
see you
put the
tomorrow.
link in our chat, so if you have a second, if you haven't already, you can go there to see it.
All right.
See
Thanks
you
all.
Thank
Bye.
you, everyone.
Marina.
Good
Bye.
night.
Good night to you.